What it do, homies? We are about to check out a channel new to me, Recollection Road. Life before the internet, you had to do what? It's interesting. This last part, you had to do what? I was born in 1990, and while technology was there, it wasn't affordable. So I pretty much grew up without internet. Anyways, let's go ahead, shut up, and turn it up. I know this is blowing some people. Yep, I grew up with a landline.
Prior to the 1990s, personal communication was pretty much
That's funny. And he opens it up with prior to the 1990s. But like I said, some of that tech wasn't affordable. And I definitely was in the low to medium average income housing where I grew up on. So back in the day where you had to remember people's numbers.
still limited to phone calls and letters. In those days, long-distance calls were expensive, and you had to plan your call in advance to avoid high fees. People would often write letters to friends and family as a way to keep in touch, and it could take weeks or even months for a response. If you needed to find out information or learn something new, the only place to go was a library, a bookstore, or your outdated set of encyclopedias. There was no Google, no Wikipedia, and no instant access to information. You had to physically go somewhere, look through books, and hope they had the information you needed. Researching before the internet was a time-consuming task, as books were organized by subject and author, and you had to flip through pages upon pages to find what you needed.
See, the only reason why this sounds like a pain is because we have something faster, right? But we didn't have anything. I say we, like I said, I know I was born in 1990. I was one, so I didn't really establish a rational thought or self awareness until you're much older. But I still know about these days. So I don't have to be born in like 1967 to understand this. But you didn't have any other idea what was faster, right? This was the fast method. So it wasn't that troublesome because there was no other alternative.
Records, 8-track tapes, cassettes, and finally CDs were how we built our music collections. Going to the record store was half the fun.
Big
Then
fat
buying an album and listening to it on a stereo or tape deck was the only way to control what music we listened to.
Walkman.
The radio made for some long waits to hear the song you wanted, so it was much faster to just fast forward through a tape to find it.
And also plugging into your tape to, or what was it? You wait for it to come onto the radio and then you would record it, right?
TV, movies, and video games were not instantly at our fingertips either. There were no streaming services, no online gaming, and certainly no YouTube. You had to rent a movie on VHS or watch it on TV when it aired, commercials and all. You also had to physically go to an arcade to play video games, if you didn't have an expensive home gaming system. The selection of movies and TV was way more limited, and you had to rely on a programming schedule or a certain night of the week to watch your favorite show. If for some reason you had to miss it, taping it using a VCR was the only way to watch it later.
And God forbid you do not discover the wrath of accidentally taping over an episode that your family member has not seen yet.
Remember when you had to shop at a brick and mortar store? There was no Amazon, no online shopping, no home delivery, with the exception of pizza.
Pennies.
You had to go to a store, physically look at a product, and pick it up off the shelf. If a store didn't have what you were looking for, you could go to another store or wait until it was restocked. Shopping was a time-consuming task, which required the consumer to manually compare prices and products.
Oh, the age of convenience.
Before the internet, making travel plans was much different. You had to rely on physical maps and printed travel guides to plan your trip. You couldn't just type in your destination and get directions. You had to physically mark your route and plan for stops along the way.
Yeah, so when I was younger, either we made a whole lot of trips down to Houston, Texas, because that's where my mother's side of the family was from. And 100%, yeah, there were times where we got lost because my mother was following the map and everything. But I've made so many trips down to Texas that I don't care to go down there anymore. I don't think I've visited since I was a teenager. I've been down there way too many times. And then another time was up to Denver, Colorado, because where my aunt lives. And yeah, used maps every single time.
You had to physically mark your route and plan for stops along the way. Booking a trip was also a hassle, as you had to call travel agencies to make arrangements. And if you wanted to know what a location was like, you had to rely on pictures in travel brochures or word of mouth from friends and family.
It's just so it's just so surreal right now. That's what it is, right? Because I'm sitting here, and history. Life is just one big huge circle, right? Because eventually time is going to advance again, right? And the conveniences that we have right now, years from now, let's see. The 90s was, well, I'm 33, so roughly 33. This is before the 90s. So we're talking about what, 40 years? So 40 years from now, there's going to be another video on today's convenience that's going to look just like this, right? Because it just repeats itself. It's just very interesting to be on this side of it now. You know what I mean? So,
The idea of a game night prior to the internet meant board games, cards, and tabletop games for entertainment. These games required face-to-face interaction to play, and sometimes it encouraged communication and teamwork, as players would strategize and work together to win.
they hated me at
There was no
Monopoly.
online games, so players had to actually be in the same room to play. This often led to fun and memorable moments that brought people closer together.
It was one of the main reasons why I picked up card games like Yu-Gi-Oh and Pokemon, right? Because there were some, like I said, I didn't have access to the internet, so I had to go into a card shop to find out what the latest cards and stuff was, or I would have to rely on my friends, or because I went to school with some friends that had already had jobs, so they were able to buy these cards, and I didn't. The cards can come out a month or 2 months ago, and I got no way of knowing it. I had no way of knowing it unless some of my friends brought in these cards, and it did make memorable moments because during the morning, right before school starts, we all get together and it starts showing these cards. I'm like, wow, when did it come out? Like a month or two ago, and everything. It's exciting.
Brought people closer together. Watching movies, especially new releases, meant heading to the movie theater. The cinema experience was so special, with the sound and picture quality being the best you could get, and the smell of movie theater popcorn made these trips a blast for sure. It was magical to sit together in a dark room and be transported to another world, if only for a couple of hours. Cooking before the internet often meant relying on handwritten recipes, cookbooks, and word of mouth to make new dishes. People had to experiment with ingredients and rely on their own intuition to create something new. This often led to a greater appreciation of food and cooking, as people took the time to learn and understand different cooking techniques and ingredients. There was also a greater sense of community, as people would share recipes and cooking tips with each other and come together for communal meals. News was completely different before the internet. People relied on nightly news, newspapers, and magazines for their daily news, as there was no 24-hour news cycle or instant access to news updates. People would have to walk to a newsstand or subscribe to a newspaper that could be delivered to their door. We would often have to wait until the next day to read the latest news, as there were no breaking news alerts or real-time updates.
Yeah, I was watching Anchorman, right, for the first time a bunch of years back, way after it came out. And I think that movie was I don't think it was based on true events, but it started talking about the invention, if I remember correctly, of worldwide news. And I was sitting here thinking, I wasn't really watching the news, and to tell you the truth, I still really don't. I kind of just look at news articles every now and then. But when did news become 24 hours? That's my question. I'm gonna research it, and I'll probably will once I'm done with this to go take a look at it. But I didn't realize that it was that recent-ish.
To read the latest news, as there were no breaking news alerts or real-time updates. The news was also generally limited to a specific region or country, as international news was often reported days after the event. Remember when people relied on film cameras and Polaroid cameras to capture memories? Digital cameras were not widely available until the late 1990s, so this meant physically going to a store to buy film and then having the pictures developed, often waiting days or even weeks to see the final results. You also had to be careful with the number of pictures you took, as film was limited and you couldn't just delete a picture if you didn't like it.
Yeah, and the guy who invented the Polaroid, which is what I was kind of mimicking and everything with the flap, right? I remember that coming out and being like super revolutionary because you no longer have to wait for your photos. But there's been so many of my birthdays that my mother would take photos, send them out to be developed, just for them to come back, and it was just terrible, right? It was what it was. You kind of had to accept it, and I think therein lies the beauty of it, right? It captured the beauty of just being human, it captured the beauty of errors, imperfections. And now everybody's so striving to get everything so perfect, right? When we take our photos, we want the best lighting and we want to look our best and everything. It's probably why I don't take many photos. I don't know why. I've just never been a photo type taken person. But yeah, embrace the imperfection.
Pictures you took, as film was limited and you couldn't just delete a picture if you didn't like it. The pictures were physical prints, and people would store them in photo albums or scrapbooks to preserve the
I
memories.
still got mine, or one that my mother made.
The ways in which we communicate clearly have been drastically altered. Handwriting letters or speaking to someone face to face has been replaced by texting. Physically writing the words or using a manual typewriter meant then using correction fluid to correct any mistakes. This created a greater sense of craftsmanship, and it was a time when people took pride in their penmanship or the speed that they could type out a letter with few mistakes.
Yep. My handwriting is chicken scratch right now. Although I do know how to write in cursive, I did pick that up. So
Despite the limitations, life before the internet was full of fun and adventure. People made the most of what they had, and they cherished their personal connections, especially face-to-face interactions. Knowing your neighbors and actually answering the door when someone knocked was the way things were done back then. I hope this journey back reminded you of the simple things in life and how technology has altered our lives completely. Let me know in the comments if I missed anything, and maybe even consider supporting the channel over on Patreon.
God, the type of stuff that you missed. I think he did a pretty good job covering like the overall gist of it. Of course, trips, as like I said, I was a kid during this time, so I've experienced it a little bit different than being an adult. But I can remember those times where we get to go to the arcade. Right, it's the only thing you could look forward to, going to the arcade, and then the Yu-Gi-Oh cards and the Pokemon
If you
cards.
enjoyed this video, consider watching this playlist. Then
that
visit
that I was telling you about. This is interesting. Y'all let me know if you want me to do some more reactions to this. I'm gonna go ahead and subscribe and hit a like, because this definitely kind of took me down memory road. And let me know one of the things you missed that doesn't happen anymore since the internet. It's the end of this video. Dave's out.